Hey, I'm Kenneth Wajda. I'm a professional photographer here in Colorado. Welcome to another one of my weekly LEICA Talks, all things LEICA. So today I want to talk about a camera that I would recommend if you're looking for a snapshot camera. Just something to take occasional film shots with, and you really want it to be kind of easy and quick. And that's the LEICA CL. And I'll tell you how I got this. So this was a camera that a friend of mine had from his mother. And he said, hey, my mom has this old Leica she used to carry around in a little case, and she's got it with a 40 and a 28 and a 90. Would you be interested? And I said, sure. That seems like a nice little kit to try and work out and use. And those lenses are obviously interchangeable to other cameras, other Leicas. And the 28 isn't a Leica lens, it's a Minolta lens. So Minolta worked with Leica to make this. In fact, Minolta made one called the Minolta CL, which you can get for less than the Leica CL. And it's essentially the same camera. It's like how Leica today works with Panasonic and makes cameras that are essentially the same camera, but they're branded differently. Minolta also made a CLE, which had, I think, a little bit more electronics, and some people actually call that the better of the different CL versions. But the Leica CL is a shorter rangefinder base, and I think it's perfect for that 40. I haven't used it much with the 28 Minolta. I'm not always carrying the 90, though it's in the case sometimes when I take this out. But most of the time I'm putting this into a little leather case that it came with, this, and I'm just putting that whole thing in my pocket. Because I like to have something very small, easily grabbed with a 40. And then it has this great leather strap that hangs vertically, which I like. They use a vertical hanging strap system so that when you're carrying it, it just hangs next to your shoulder. I like that. They use that on the CL, and the Leica M5 had side lugs as an alternative to just the regular top lugs that most cameras have. The 40mm lens isn't the most common lens. Now, if you end up with a CL with a 40 and then you put it onto a Leica M3, you'll end up with 50mm frame lines coming up. Ideally, if you can have that extra room when you're making a photo, your picture will be a little wider than you thought. At least it won't be cutting anything off. I like the 40 on this camera. I typically don't use it on any camera but this because I like having a frame line that's accurate. But that's me. Again, I'm a photographer who's working to make photographs that I want control over. The reason I use Leica is because I want control over what the final photo is going to be. The viewfinder is really nice and bright inside, and it's got frame lines for 50, 40. I don't see a frame line. Oh, I do see a frame line for 90. I don't typically, again, use those. I'm usually using an F40. I think if you use the whole finder, it is essentially equivalent to a 28, but there's not actual 28 markings in here. And I don't like that either. I kind of like having what I'm seeing is actually marked. The CLE, I'm pretty sure, has those 28mm markings. So if you are looking for one, look for that Minolta and you'll be able to get those 28mm frame line markings. This one, the one thing that's good about it is the 40mm works with my glasses. I'm left-eyed as I'm holding it up without having to move my eye around the frame to see the edges of the photo frame. So that's a bonus for me. So if you wear glasses, definitely the 40 is like right there. Whatever I pick up the camera to my eye, everything I see. That's a real bonus to me. I've talked about my favorite Leicas, and certainly it changes by which one I have in my hand sometimes. I've talked about the M6 as like, you know, the best one because, well, it was my first one. But then I also talk about the M2, and the M2 is like one of my favorites, and it is. And it's early, it's no meter, it's very mechanical. well, they're all mechanical, but the idea that it's all just, you know, precision, bunch of brass and gears, and it makes it work. Well, same with this. This has a light meter in it. I never used the light meter in it, so I don't bother with the batteries. I'm pretty sure the batteries are an old mercury battery that you can't get anymore, and you can adapt it. But I just use Sunny 16 with this Leica. The only Leica that I ever use a meter with is that M6. But the CL, the M2, the M3, I just use Sunny 16 because it works so well. And if you're not familiar with Sunny 16, I'll give you a quick rundown. Basically, if you're shooting 400 speed film, you put your camera at a shutter speed that's closest to 400, which on this camera would be 500. It goes up to 1,000. So I'm shooting out in bright sun. 400 and a 500 are close enough. I put it at 500 because I have 400 speed film in there, and then I put the camera aperture at whatever the sun is doing in my photo. So if the sun is bright and the sun is shining right on my subject, Sunny 16 says put the camera on 16. 500 at f16, good to go. If the sun's a little bit hazy or you're getting a little bit of side light, move it up to f11. Okay, good to go. Now you're backlit. The sun's behind the subject. Or you're in a little bit of shade. Do an f8. Now you're getting an f8 will get you the proper exposure. Next thing you know, you go down further, you go into a really dim area, or it gets to be cloudy or rainy. Okay, go to 5.6. All you keep doing is moving that aperture scale a little bit each time to make it so that you have the exposure based on the light that's hitting your subject. And it's always the same. The light doesn't change all that much. Every day it's about the same. And which, as you use Sunny 16, you learn. And then when you see your negatives and they're all even, you go, oh, that's pretty consistent. And then for inside use, this camera, the 40 millimeters in f2 Summicron, the thing that I do is I put the camera on f2 and shoot as slow as I dare. That's the rule for Sunny 16 for me inside. So if it's a really bright interior with some lamps and a nice kitchen with some good fill light, yeah, maybe you could get more than a 60 f2, but a 60 f2 will give you a photo. If it's really dim and you say I could shoot at a 30th or a 15th, you can, but people tend to blur. I've often joked, use a 15th or a 30th of a second for the people you don't care about. So I'm a fan of 60 f2 inside. If it's really bright, maybe go 2.8, but 60 f2 inside. Then outside, Sunny 16, full sun 16, hazy sun, side lit 11, backlight f8, cloudy 5.6. And then you can work the combinations. If you're doing 500 at 16, you can also do 1,000 at 11. You can obviously, once you hit the combination for what works, then you can move off of that if you want to use different apertures or shutter speeds. The CL, all mechanical, manual shutter speed dial, manual aperture scale, everything you need. Get to know those positions, although in this lens, this is infinity, this is 5 or 6 feet, and this focuses to about 2.5 feet. So unlike my 50 millimeter, my 35, the positions on here are a little bit different. They're a little closer. But you get to know that. That 40 millimeter lens is a really quality lens. Very sharp. I've used it a lot. All right, that's today's photography talk. If you're enjoying these, hit the subscribe button. I'll be back next time. We'll talk more Leica. As always, here's the good light.